Hey folks, Ariel over here at Nyth, where today I want to talk about condensation and moisture issues in a tiny house. It is currently really cold. I think it's warmed up to like -5. It was about, that's Fahrenheit, it was about -12 when I got up. It hasn't been above, I guess it got above 0, but it hasn't been above freezing in a bunch of weeks. Not sure exactly how long. Anyway, this humidity and moisture in a tiny house is an issue I was not very aware of when I first built my house, and I think a lot of people were not. And since I think most people have become aware of it, but I haven't talked about it in a really long time. I do not really currently have a humidity problem. So mine has been resolved. I had a terrible humidity problem for my first winter in here. Since then, I have installed a wood stove, and that's pretty much taken care of it. But let me talk about this a bit. You get humidity in the air from all kinds of things, from cooking, from breathing. A human exhales like 3 pints of water a day just through as you breathe in and out, and evaporation off your skin and such. If you shower in your house, obviously that's going to make some humidity. If you heat with propane, that makes humidity, because one of the results of burning propane is heat and then moisture is released. And so there's lots of ways to get air in a house. In my house, or I mean, get water in the air in your house. In my house, it comes from me breathing, Burley breathing, cooking. That's the dishwashing. That's probably the main sources. Now, when it's this cold, well below 0, that'd be like when I got up it was like -24 Celsius. You do get a little bit of condensation right on the bottoms of the windows here, or kind of in the corners, a little bit up here, mostly on the bottoms. That's just because of the temperature difference between inside and outside. I know I'm going to get tons of comments about that I should have different windows. These are triple pane low E windows. The reason they still get some condensation is just because the temperature difference from inside to outside is so big. It's, like I said, you know, well below 0 out there. It's 70, so it's close to 80 in here right now. I could actually open some more windows. But that's a 90-degree temperature difference. That's fairly big. So then the moisture just condenses out on the glass panes, because that's the easiest place for it's where the most heat exchange happens. Now again, this is not an issue for me. I currently have 3 windows open in here. It is still, right at this moment, about -5, and I do have 3 windows in the house open, and it's still 80 degrees in here. So that, the heating is not a problem. I know people are always concerned. The Braley and I stay warm enough in here. We are very warm. Could even get rid of a shirt. This moisture often builds up more overnight because it's colder, usually in the middle of the night than the middle of the day. And my wood stove will often burn out overnight. I should probably do an updated video on stove stuff, but people often ask me about, isn't it such a pain to get up in the middle of the night and put wood in the stove? It would be. I don't. I'm way too lazy for that. I just, in the evening when I'm hanging out in here, keep feeding wood as fast as I can into it. Makes the house really warm. Again, that's why I have the loft curtain to keep the heat out of where I want to sleep, because I don't enjoy sleeping very warm. Stack it clear full of wood, go to bed. When I get up, I do generally sleep very soundly. That's usually a good 9 hours later. Yes, it has burned out, and the house has cooled down some. How much it's cooled down depends on how cold it is outside, but it's still an acceptable temperature inside. I just get up and relight it. So I do not get up in the middle of the night to stock my stove. Like I said, I'm way too lazy for that. So because there's less heat, I do often get more moisture overnight. I actually get more up in the loft, just because Burley and I are both laying in bed there, breathing all night and making moisture. But with wood heat, you know, now it's morning and my stove's going and it's plenty hot. Wood is a very, very drying heat. So drying, in fact, that I keep a pot of water simmering on top of it, which is also how I make the house smell really good. Go use a little search thing on the channel and find the video about that, what I use instead of burning candles in here. And it just, by midway through the day, it usually dries out all this moisture on the windows. So I do not struggle with humidity and mold problems in here. Now, before the wood stove, I did. when I first moved in here, I had propane heat, and I still do as a backup. I have lots of videos on heating options that I'm familiar with. So with propane heat, which, as I said, one of the byproducts of burning propane is water. Even with a vented propane heater, which is way better than an unvented, I don't know, maybe the vented did not actually add moisture to the inside air, but it did not take any out, like the wood heat is such a dry heat, and it actually removes moisture. So when I had that, this was my very first winter in here, I'm now my 5th winter here, I ended up with, not with just a little moisture here that goes away by partway through the day, I had all of my windows literally running water off of them, which meant the wood frames were saturated. It was saturated clear out to here. This wood stayed wet all the time, all around all the windows, and then I started getting mold. Because if something's wet all the time, it's going to mold eventually. And I live in a crazy dry climate, probably one of the drier climates, at least in the continental US. I did not expect to have condensation problems. But again, I breathe, I cook, and so that also makes moisture in a tiny house. And the problems would have probably been worse if I'd been somewhere more humid. And so this became a real problem. I mean, every day I was going around with a rag and like wiping off moisture on the windows and wringing out, just trying to keep up with that. This rapidly became unsustainable. Things you could do about that. You could run a dehumidifier. I don't have enough electrical power that I wanted to do that, but if you have an unlimited grid electric, you can certainly run a dehumidifier. I think Tumbleweed actually started building them in after constructing mine and getting my feedback on how bad the humidity issues were in here. Now, one of the things that makes this worse than most bigger houses is because it's a small space. So if I breathe in a 3,000 square foot house and the little moisture bits that I exhale or that evaporate off my skin, you know, transfer through 3,000 square feet, they get pretty spread out. I'm in like 170 square feet. They don't have room to spread out that much, so they're more concentrated. And my house is super well insulated. I do not have air leaking in. There's not cold air coming in around the windows. And that means that there's very little air exchange. Now, what I've done about this, again, because I now have wood heat, I have virtually unlimited amounts of firewood. It's standing dead out there, hundreds of cords, already killed by beetles. And so firewood is not difficult for me to access. So I can feel free to burn plenty of wood, and then I just leave windows open. There's a little window right up here in that loft. It has been open a crack forever. I haven't, you know, just a little crack like that, but I haven't closed it in at least 4 years. The one bedroom window up in my loft, same thing. I don't think I've closed it in years. In the summer, I have all of them wide open, but it's always open at least this much. That helps move some air through here. Now, in hindsight, if you're going to have a very well insulated, snug, small space, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to put in a heat recovery air exchange. I was, again, unaware of this when I was laying out what I wanted in my house, so I don't have one, but it would do much of the same thing. It would just help keep some of your heat inside, because of course with the windows open a crack, I do lose heat. It goes outside. Again, that's not an issue for me because, I mean, even given that, and I actually have a third window open right now, it's below zero out there, and it is still, I think it's like 81 in here now. I can open the windows wider. And the stove's not even raging. It's just got break holes in there. So anyway, that is how I have got my air exchange going, because if I close all the windows, this place is so well insulated, having spray foam in the walls and floors and ceiling and everything, that the very little air does move in and out. You can also use vent fans. I do have one in the bathroom and above my kitchen range. Those do suck air to the outside. Again, I just don't like to run them all the time because they make noise and they use electricity, both of which get a little annoying. So I could do that, but for me, with wood heat making the house so hot, even with my little stove, it's easiest to just open some windows. But these are all things I just wanted to mention because I know some of you are here because you're building your own houses or thinking about building a house, and this can be a very, very, very big issue. And when you start to get mold in a home, now mine didn't get bad. I was able to, with bleach and borax, kill the mold spores in the wood. I'm pretty sure they're dead because in 4 years nothing has come back. And air that all out and be able to get rid of that. But if you get mold growing in your house, as most people probably know by now, that can lead to severe health complications. So you do not want that happening. So this is something you want to be aware of. And think about how you are going to manage the humidity in your home, because especially if you have a small and well-insulated space, you are going to have humidity in your home. Just from you breathing in there, even if you don't cook much, and even if you don't take long hot showers, and even, you know, whatever, that it still happens. And then again, if you live in a more humid climate, it's probably going to happen more. Now, if you are in a very hot climate, which I am not, I think that would improve some, because you would probably just have windows open more of the time, but then you also probably have more humidity in your air, in at least most warmer climates, not all of them. So then you're just going to have humidity making things damp a lot of the time, period, because that's all the air is damp. So that is something to, Burley's waking up and stretching from his nap. You want to come up here? You want to go outside? You can go out. Bye-bye. So wherever you live, this is something to think about. And like I said, it does become more of an issue quicker in a small space, just because everything is more concentrated in a small space. So what to do about it? If you live somewhere cold, I highly recommend a wood stove. Well, if you live somewhere cold with good access to firewood, a wood stove is great. It will probably solve all of your moisture problems, sufficient that you will be adding moisture back to the air just so it's not so dry. If that doesn't make sense for wherever you are, then a dehumidifier might make sense. If running an electrical powered dehumidifier does not work well in your situation because of lack of electricity or whatever, there are some, I'll link to it. I had used for a little bit before I put in my wood stove. It's not a salt crystal. I should have looked this up before I started making a video. Anyway, I'll link to it down below. It's a crystal that likes to absorb moisture, and so you can make your own, but I had one that had this little container that held them, and it would kind of condense the moisture out, and it had a bucket down below it that would fill with water that I could then empty. That did help as well. So you could do something like that. I know some people have made their own with just putting those crystals in a sack in their basement or crawl space and hanging it over like a 5-gallon bucket to catch all the condensation that drips down to help remove moisture from there. Obviously you have to eventually empty the bucket, but that's it's just something I want to discuss, because even though it's pretty much a non-issue for me, even as I'm sitting here I can see most of this moisture has gone away, and it wasn't there long enough that even the wood just right around the windows is still totally dry. So even though it's a non-issue for me, so I haven't really thought about it or discussed it in a while, I realize not everyone lives in a dry climate, and not everyone is running a wood stove if they're building a tiny house. So I just wanted to mention that it's something to be aware of. So wood heat would probably fix it. Running sufficient dehumidification would fix it. Good air exchange does help. So if you don't have a climate where you're going to have your windows open all of the time, thinking about a heat, if you're in a colder area, a heat recovery exchange system, or I suppose I think they would help keep cool air inside too if you're running an air conditioner. That's not something I need to do, so I'm not positive about that. But anyway, it helps you keep your climate-controlled air in your house and not just lose it all to the outdoors. So those are all things to be aware of and think about, and I just wanted to mention it so that nobody else ended up getting a house built, moving in and loving it, and then all of a sudden having moisture just streaming down their walls. This is also tends to be more of an issue with living in an RV if you have a big temperature difference, which it can work out very well for some people in some situations, but if you are trying to maintain a 90 or 100 degree temperature difference in an RV with its very generally thinner walls, for the same reason that my moisture condenses on the window first versus the thick walls, you're going to probably get a lot of moisture issues, and a lot of older RVs, depending at least what climate they've been in, do have moisture or mold damage inside. So that's something to be aware of with that as well. And again, it's it's not just a concern because mold looks gross. A lot of those molds that like to grow in a house like that, or in wood, or in your furnishings and stuff, are pretty toxic to human health. So that's just something to be aware of. And just stop for a minute if you're building or moving into a tiny house right now, and think about how are you going to manage the moisture created in your home, because even if you think you're not doing anything that makes a lot of moisture, which I did, I rapidly learned that just breathing and making dinner and having a friend over and sitting here and talking for the evening, all of that puts a lot of moisture into the air. And again, it's very concentrated when your house is small, and so you do have to figure out what you're going to do about that. So that's just something I wanted to note to make sure nobody ended up with a nasty house or health issue with that. So if you've got other great suggestions for how to remove moisture for the air, if somebody's looking, go ahead and comment them down below so we can have a good resource list for folks again. And have a lovely day wherever you are. Thanks for watching, folks. If you're interested in more info on my off-grid tiny house life, check out some of my other videos here. And if you like what you're seeing, click the little picture of my house to subscribe, and then hit the little bell so YouTube actually notifies you every time there's a new video available. See y'all next time.